So I have one topic in there. They might also, Dan Vanderster is messaging me on Slack. He had something he wanted to talk about. An interesting topic, maybe, I don't know, a difficult topic, but we'll see if Kathy joins or not. But at least in the meantime, we have this one thing in here about the IPv6 stuff. I see somebody put it there asking for a link to the broken code. I can get that real quick. Let me share my screen.
Yeah, that was me asking for the link, by the way.
Yeah, so we'll quickly do this topic, and I know we have some other stuff. Let me try to share tab. Yes, we have this, and then you wanted to see the broken part. So it's in this video. Okay. Right, can you see that? Is the screen share still working?
Yes.
Yeah, so we call this attempt bind thing here. And we call it with whatever IP we have, which is either this IPv6 or IPv4, if we're in this case here. And attempt bind doesn't actually differentiate them once you get there. We don't tell it if it's IPv6 or IPv4. We just try to bind with this little tuple here with the address and the port. So I guess it's 1411 right now is the one that's where it breaks. And as the other pad was talking about, the reason it breaks for IPv6 is because the IPv6 addresses need a for tuple with some extra fields that I was basically just learning about the other day. There's two extra ones. What are they called? Flow info and scope ID. And the flow info, at least I think we could just pass 0. I think that's consistently should be good. But the scope ID, I was trying to figure out a bit more about what it is, because it's definitely not 0. I think I was working with 2, which I think correlates to a link level scope. But I was trying to find if there was a way to, like, from the address, find out exactly what scope it is, or if we just be assuming they're all going to be link level scopes. I couldn't find a lot of information on it.
So. Not if they're actually going to use IPv6 like outside of a LAN. So link locals for like just hosts on a local network talking to each other.
Yeah. There's a lot of people are going to be deploying it that way.
There's some syntaxes where there's like embedded % and the device name so that you
I saw that one as well. Yeah. But you can't pass that to the thing we're trying to do. We can't pass that to this.
Right.
So this thing has to have the extra field at the end saying what the scope ID is.
Right. I mean, the code is under our control. We can do a bunch of stuff. So what I haven't had time for is to figure out like where this is interfacing with the rest of the world. Like if we could, check it, that would be fine. I just don't know where the information is coming from in this.
So I just posted some live config stuff just as an example to see, like, this one. This one obviously is one we wouldn't actually use. This is the host level one, but that's you're not going to use this loopback address for your cluster anyway. But.
Yeah, normally I'd go dig into it with you, but since we have other people in the meeting, I think it's good that you raised it. But like, we can probably either swap this discussion to the end of the meeting about like code, or just save it for another day.
All right. Yeah, we've spent some time. Now that you guys know about it, we can investigate it a bit later and come back to it. But I wanted to bring it up because currently, if you try to bootstrap an IPv6 cluster, it just always fails. It isn't great.
Yeah.
And try to fix that. Like you said, there are other people here. I see Josh and Dan. I know, Dan, you were joining. I don't know if Josh, you have the same topic as him, or if you were here on something else.
Hello.
Hey, same topic. Just want to hear the discussion.
Okay. So what I remember from the brief discussion on Slack, you were interested, Dan, in sort of a package version of Ceph VDM.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess this has come up a few times, even going back to the origin stories of Ceph ADM, there was always, I mean, the orchestrator in Ceph was meant to be kind of flexible and supported different plugins. There was the SSH orchestrator, there was the DeepSea, the Ansible orchestrator. So I suppose the purpose of the call is to understand if and how one would develop a package-based SSH orchestrator. So, in other words, a package version of a package orchestrating version of Ceph ADM. I mean, I'll confess I didn't follow the development of Ceph ADM lately, so I'm not at all an expert on the internals of how it's implemented. So I'm kind of here to understand, like, at a high level, what you think is the feasibility of that and how that would be attacked, and also actually if you think it's a really bad idea or if you think it's a good idea. The motivation from my point of view and some of the users I've spoken to seems to be clear. So they want to be able to operate and orchestrate their Ceph clusters in a modern supported way. However, there's a contingent of users that don't want a container-based Ceph. They want to continue using RPMs or Debs. Of course, it's clear that we won't be able to support all of the features of Ceph. Things like gateways that are only available, that are complex to build and package, and dependency hell, things like Ganesha gateways and other gateways. But if we can, at least in initial versions, support the basics of a core Ceph cluster, I think this would be a pretty big win.
Yeah, so I actually took a little bit of a look around which things are very dependent on specifically container stuff and which things are more abstracted a bit yesterday after you messaged me. From what I could tell, the manager module is actually mostly abstracted, with the exception of the upgrade. And there's a few things I specifically expect there to be container images attached to the daemons. But it's actually fairly abstract up there. The binary, on the other hand, that actually does host actions on the host. That one is very dependent on actual implementation. So something like that would probably have to be almost entirely rewritten. There's some way to deploy packages. Like, at least the core functionality, we'd have to be able to, say the deploy command would have to be entirely redone with the packages. The ls command, which finds all the daemons on the hosting, would have to be redone, things like that. But if that existed and there was a binary that at least had the main core things it would do, with setting the daemons and deploying them and things, some of the FE was able to get that to work. I think it's possible you could. I wouldn't put them together into the same module. I think that's too much. I don't know, too risky almost to try to put it into the current Ceph ADM, but you could have a module where you start with roughly the current Ceph ADM module code base and make some modifications there. I think it would work. I think most of the work would just be in the binary on the low level functionality.
Okay.
Actually deploying the daemons and things.
Okay. I mean, how does it? So Ceph ADM is the name for the tool that sets things up, but it's also the name for the backend module orchestrator. How is that? How do you suggest naming things?
I don't know. It could. Yeah. I'm not sure exactly how we would want to name this one. It's kind of like Ceph ADM package version, but also it's not, because I assume if this was a separate thing, it would not be getting all the same updates or anything. It would probably just be the core functionality in this case, unless somebody wanted to go through and try to do those sort of updates.
I mean, it'd be useful, the upgrade, the mechanics of upgrading are sometimes they're often multi-step. So it'd be useful if that was common, just done in one spot.
Yeah, the problem is just that the upgrade is very dependent on the container images. So that's how it checks what's been upgraded, what hasn't, and so you can't really transfer that over with the packages, I think.
I see.
Because at least the check part have to be different. I think that's one of the biggest parts in the manager module that can't be transferred over, is the upgrade part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one thing I would add is if you're talking packages, as you mentioned, there's two varieties. You've got the deb packages and the RPM packages. So then you can kind of have a either two modules, one that's dedicated to RPM and one that's dedicated to deb, or try to do them both in one package-based module. But then you might run into a whole host of if statements, and you might find, hey, maybe it was easier to just focus on whichever one is, say, the one that you have the most demand for at first, and say, okay, in the future, someone could go off and do, Ceph package ADM -RPM, but I'm going to focus on deb or whatever.
Yeah. So I think you could share a manager module for it. I think it's possible you'd have them share a manager module that do the package stuff. I think the binary part on the host would probably have to be separate. If there's big implementation differences between the two, then I think it's going to need different binaries.
Okay.
I'd have to call into. So that's the one that goes into all those little details that are implementation specific, whereas the manager module is supposed to abstract to some level. And I wouldn't want to put it in the current Ceph ADM manager module because there are some. It does expect containers on a lot of things, but I could see two different packages maybe sharing a manager module. There's not too many differences at that level.
Yeah, and even at the library level, you could start to share code because now that there's the Ceph common, you could say, oh, well, this class could really be moved out of the manager module into common and be used by multiple manager modules. Right.
Yeah, I could definitely see a world where we take some of the stuff from Ceph ADM and we expose that to all, like, say, 2 or 3 different manager modules. It's just there's certain things that should be specific to the container one, I think, including the upgrade. I think the upgrade is one of the ones that's the most implementation specific.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, at a high level, you don't think this is crazy and a waste of time. I mean, there was another dimension to this, which is we still build packages. We will continue to build packages. The containers are constructed out of the packages that we build. I'm right in saying that there are features of Ceph that we won't be able to do via the package without containers, right? Take, for example, Ganesha gateways.
There's some like things that are deployed only in containers that you wouldn't be able to deploy without containers, but that doesn't mean that everything would have to be containers, right?
Yeah.
Like the Prometheus stuff, the Jaeger tracing stuff, I think those are all deployed via containers.
Oh, it could be actually. Yeah, maybe you could even imagine a mixed scenario where some things are running in containers and some are not. Because I think that for the majority of the users, it's like they want to adopt an existing cluster that's container based. And I mean, that's the use cases I'm aware of. To adopt an existing Ansible or whatever based package based cluster, which probably doesn't have any of that new stuff anyway. So the new stuff could be container based. Okay.
Yeah, so that could work as long as you can figure out the low-level stuff. Like I said, deploying a daemon with a package is going to need its own whole setup to do that versus the container one. That's totally different. So I mean, if it was going to be able to do both things, then maybe we could even have it share some of the code Ceph ADM has right now for doing that. Because we are eventually going to split it up. Right now, it's one big file, but after the Reef release, we're going to start splitting up that file into multiple pieces, and maybe it's possible to import some of them into some other new thing after that. But again, I think the big sort of tasks for doing this sort of thing would have to be starting from the low-level stuff. Like if I give you a keyring and a config file, can you deploy a Ceph daemon with a package, or something like that? If I ask for, I don't know, because I know for containers also we pull the images down. That's pretty simple. You'd also have some way to install the packages on the host if you wanted before. That's something we don't have to worry about in the container-based Ceph ADM because we can just pull images. It's pretty easy. So stuff like that would have to be figured out. But if you had a binary that could sort of replicate 3 or 4 of the main sort of things that you need to do with the packages, and I think you could start working on a manager module after that that could at least do those simple things.
Yeah, I mean the it would basically follow the manual installation instructions.
Yeah, pretty much. You just have to automate those instructions or something, and have some way you can call that with a few important pieces of information and do that.
Yeah.
That's basically what the Ceph EDM binary does, like for deploying things. It's just a bunch of the manual steps to deploy a container-based Ceph daemon, and then we just automated it. And then we have it in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's possible. It's just, again, you need somebody who's willing to put the time into that low-level stuff, deploying all the packages and stuff, and understands that process well, so they can automate that.
Yeah. So those low-level actions like installing, querying the hardware, right? Like discovering hardware.
We really only worry about discovering disks for the most part on Ceph EDM for the OSDs. We don't worry. Well, we're going to probably in the future add some more stuff like looking at hardware, but we don't currently worry too much about any other hardware besides disks. And even that functionality, we actually have Ceph Volume do that. So I assume you could probably use Ceph Volume as well for doing that discovery.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we do it manually already with other tooling.
Yeah. So other than that, we don't worry about too much of the hardware. I think it's just installing the packages and deploying a daemon with the packages, giving us a few pieces of information. Being able to detect all the daemons that are on the host is also a big one. Detecting the devices, as you were just talking about, would be a big one. I think what else you would need for it to work.
Oh, you'd need a, but you like everything, the model is always like, let's say, polling the hosts, right? Is there a stateful daemon that runs on an admin node that checks the status of that always is aware of the status of all the daemons in the cluster?
We have one that it's optional. You can deploy it. It's called the agent. It's just, we haven't documented or anything. It's kind of experimental. That runs and goes and does check stuff. But even that is sort of, I guess, a polling thing. It's just a very frequent polling thing. But generally right now, the Ceph EDM deployments, it's like once every 10 minutes, it'll go and it'll check the daemons are on the host or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so all you really need is one thing that can go through and find them all. Like we call it Ceph EDM LS.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you would need a version of that works with the packages, basically.
That SSHs around. I mean, the SSHing around part would be the same, and it would just call systemctl status instead of Docker PS, right?
Yeah. I think even that, I think it uses the systemd units for a bit of it as well, but it definitely does use the containers for parts. So we'd have to replace that part, whatever you need to do for the packages.
Okay.
But I think, if you could install the packages, you could deploy a daemon using the packages, and you could check which daemons are there and get the devices as well if you need those for deploying the OSDs. That would be like the starting point, I think, before you could do anything else.
Okay. And could you speak more? You at Cephalicon, someone mentioned the idea to like factor Ceph EDM out into multiple classes and then compile it in some kind of binary to still distribute it around. Is that's
already sort of happened? It's
okay.
It's just Reef is the first release that'll have that. But right now it's because we want to make sure it actually works first. It's still just one file. We're technically compiling it, but we're compiling a single file into a.
Okay.
And then the idea is after the Reef release, if that all goes okay, we're going to start splitting it up into multiple files and compile those together into a binary.
Yeah, and the other reason that we didn't split it yet is the ease of backports.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so after the Reef release comes out, again, assuming things go okay and that doesn't cause any issues, we're going to start splitting it up. If, like, say you wanted to like import some things from there or whatever, but currently it's still one big file, so it's kind of hard to work with. But post Reef release, that should change if things go well.
Okay.
Dan, I have a question about the use cases you mentioned. You talked about like kind of an upgrade situation. Would you envision lots of folks using this on new clusters as well, or?
I mean, I think that there's a kind of lack of comfort that some old school sysadmins have with operating container-based Ceph clusters. So they might use it.
Sure.
I think that's the point. People just don't know how to like They don't like having in a bad situation. They don't want to have to like figure out how to read the log files.
So I was going to bring that point up. So I'm glad you kind of touched on it. I'm kind of the resident container lover. So I was curious if there are other things we could do to ease the technical. Obviously, we're not going to convince people who are just like, I hate containers, period, go away. But if there's technical pain points that people have, like, I'm not sure how to do this, we could probably add some levels of automation to, run the Docker/Podman command under the covers, but we document, run Ceph ADM shell -- blah, blah, or something. So if there's a list of pain points that people have, that make them uneasy of using containers, but are willing to try it if those pain points are eased, I would love to see that list.
I mean, I think there's small things like the locations of the log files. Okay, that's like trivial. That's not really the big deal. I think it's also like, in case something goes wrong with Docker or Podman, they have no skills to fix it. That probably rarely or almost never happens. Are you aware of any cases where that happens? Or that has happened?
Personally, no. But like, again, we could abstract some of the things so that they don't have to know Podman or Docker XYZ. But obviously, we couldn't do it everywhere. So if the issue is just there's this new thing in the system that I don't like, yeah.
So I don't know. We could try to. I mean, that's something that should happen anyway. Just find out where people are still need help. I think it's already quite well documented, right? It's quite well like, here's the equivalence. If you are doing package based, this is what you do. If you do Ceph ADM, this is what you do. The other like orthogonal issue is there's like skepticism about the security of things running in containers, not being able to.
I could strongly say that running in containers is no weaker than running in packages. You could quibble if like virtualization, like if you're not running containers without virtualization extensions to protect it, that they're not better, but they're certainly not worse, if that makes sense.
I mean, like in cases that any SSL library is broken, for example. I mean, it's a yum update on a package. It's a package-based machine. It's a package-based on a package machine. It's a yum update to fix the container-based. I mean, actually, we simply don't recompile. We don't rebuild container images for old versions of Ceph, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I had forgotten about that aspect of the thing. I was thinking of like the security of the running thing. Okay.
Yeah. So that's one issue that has come up several times. Yeah. Do you remember there was like a very long, like 70 mails thread about containers, about containerized Ceph back maybe 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think I read that thread.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that stuck out was the security aspect. Okay, so I guess if we decide to go ahead with taking a stab at this, we should coordinate to make sure that like the work that we do it aligns with the refactoring that you're doing, or because you're planning that refactoring sort of like this summer, right? You'll start doing that. You will start splitting into many classes this summer.
Yeah, so assuming the release comes out and there's no issues with the compiled version currently, that's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want to reuse certain parts of it, I mean, so in the meantime, again, the main thing is just some of those core things like the deployment they're pulling the packages in that are going to be specific to this version. If you wanted to get that working, you could do that whenever. And if you want to take some of the other things from Ceph ADM, the current Ceph ADM afterwards, some of the other functionality, I think we'll have the chance to split that GAT in the summer later on.
Okay.
We should probably also mention that there is a second orchestrator backend in the tree. It's not well loved, but the Rook orchestrator module can serve as a jumping off point for seeing how the code, how the different modules interact.
Okay, so does Rook use the Rook orchestrator module?
No.
Okay. All right.
Which is one of the reasons it's a bit unloved.
Okay.
Yeah, at one point it did like work apparently, like fine. It was tested and everything, but just it wasn't getting any use, so it kind of was like withered a bit, and the tests don't actually pass anymore because some issues with installing some of the Kubernetes and some things, I think. So it's kind of there, but it is an example of how you could have a second one in there, and like there's
That's
obviously
what I meant.
Yeah, there's obviously some functionality differences between them. You can see like there's certain commands that aren't implemented in the Rook one at all, so you'll just get a not implemented error if you try to do them. But it's fine to have that. You can just, because at least it allows us to still use that Orch interface for all of them. And if there is shared functionality, which there often is for some things, like say like an Orch PS, I just want to list my daemons. You can see that being a thing in multiple different orchestrators. So that one's fine, but something specific to like a bare metal host that Ceph ADM does, Rook just won't have it implemented, and that's okay as well. So you could definitely do that with the RPM thing. You would probably even have some commands that are only for the RPM thing, and then Ceph ADM wouldn't have them implemented. That's also fine. So, but you can put a lot of stuff through that interface.
Okay, I caught most of that. The audio suddenly has just gone bad. Was it just
your video
just my side?
Shut off as well? I don't know if that's.
I switched off my video to hopefully save bandwidth. Okay. I don't know. I thought I had gigabit fiber, but maybe that's not enough for Jitsi.
Yeah, I can't tell if it was on my end or not. So I was basically just saying that you can use the Orch interface for a bunch of different things. It doesn't have to have one-to-one matching with the Ceph ADM does to use the interface. So you could definitely have a new module that goes through there. You also can, and we do this occasionally, we have functions that are, or methods that are defined in Ceph ADM, or I guess commands. So like there's like our court or keyring handling, like we deploy certain client keyrings to hosts. That one, even the outer part of it that like parses that command is actually in Ceph ADM. There's no Orch keyring whatever in the orchestrator module. So you can also do that if you want for specific things. And those commands will just only be available if that module is on. So there's a few ways you can do that, but I think that's that'll be like the easier part of this. I think the hardest part is just going to be doing all the low-level stuff that the Ceph ADM binary does currently to deploy all the packages and stuff.
Okay, that binary, just so I understand the structure, that binary, that's the thing that's in SRC Ceph ADM, right? Because that's also the binary that we use to sort of bootstrap a cluster, right? It's the Ceph ADM PY.
It's this one. Yeah, it used to just be Ceph ADM. Now it's cephadm.py as part of that compiling thing. But it's this one. You see, it's absolutely massive currently, which is why we want to split it up.
So this is both the CLI tool and the actuator on the hosts.
Yeah. So like for example, the manager module actually makes calls to this. Like say this command with all these arguments and stuff. Almost nobody runs this command manually. It's like
got it.
But the manager module calls this, and it'll pass in some of these configs and certain things, and then this can deploy a daemon. And you can do it manually. Like I've tried it before with a bunch of things, but you almost never will. It's just almost for like testing it. You'll do it manually at first, then eventually, when you have it set up, the manager module will just call this, and that's how you deploy a daemon.
Okay. So the stuff related to like creating OSDs and let's say creating daemons, that should all be pretty standard. That should all be the same, I guess.
I think a lot of stuff we write ends up, because at the end of the day we're writing basically a unit file. I guess what you write in the unit file could be the same. It's just what we write into it is obviously totally different. We're writing in basically a massive podman run command. That is the end goal.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So that stuff's all going to be different. But like some of like the higher level parts of this you could probably take, but I think you pretty much have to rewrite this. I think it would be too complicated to have this like work for a package and a container at once. There's too many differences.
Yeah.
But you can take definitely the ideas from it and then try it there.
Okay. All right. So it's not just the manager module. It's also cephadm.py.
Yeah, I think this would have to be the bigger part of the work. Would be basically
Yeah.
replicating some of this ceph.py stuff. The manager module is a lot more abstract than the this part. Because this part is the one that actually interacts with the containers itself and deploys them and things. So
Got
I
it.
think if you had this, again, if you had something like this, and there's a few other commands I think you would probably need as well, and then you replicated that, you could pretty much take most of what's in this FADM manager module and pretty much copy it over and move a few things here and there, and I think it would work with some mythical package version of this binary if it existed.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and that does raise another question, which is delivery of this new thing, which is, should it be as part of the existing Ceph binary, but like a different PY file, or would people be literally downloading a whole new binary, call it Ceph PKG admin? So is it, how separated is that part, and what's the workflow around there?
Yeah, I guess we'll see when we get to we should try to reuse as much of the code as possible. We'll see. If we decide to go ahead with this, I'd like to POC something pretty quickly, and then we could see about making it nice structured later.
So, at one point, I think there was the belief or assertion that containers were the future for Ceph only, but I don't know if that's really still the case. Is it? Or Josh, do you know?
Well, I don't think we ever said that it was the only thing that was possible. I think we've always been saying that we continue to build packages, and even at Cephalocon, I think when we asked the audience, it's one particular audience, but I think 75% of them were still running on bare metal.
Yeah. Well, I think it depended on who you asked, Josh, because I'm pretty sure I heard at least one person say containers only are the future. Sure. But yeah, I agree with you. I think the users are not there necessarily, at least not entirely.
Yeah, and that may change over the years, but I think it's still definitely a helpful thing for a lot of folks today.
So I don't know if that kind of goes, if that affects your question, John, but it does seem like there's a lot of people out there that still want packages. So where that should live, I guess, maybe that affects that answer.
Yeah, because the binary it's kind of a misnomer, but it's kind of stuck at this point. It's still all just Python. It's not compiled C code or C++ code or anything. But it could have multiple personalities using traditional Unix things like argv0 switching or whatever. So to say, let's have one workflow might be a good thing. You download this file, but then maybe depending on how you name it, it will have a different personality or something. But I think to Dan's earlier point, if it's like I want to do a POC, I would probably start independently at first, have a separate binary just for hacking purposes, and then we can come back to the whole, does it live together in one one physical, for lack of a better word, unit, or do people have to have completely different workflows depending on which one they want to bootstrap with?
Okay. Okay. Oops. No, I didn't mean to raise my hand. All right. I guess, I don't know. I guess we'll go back on our side and debate the merits of this, and then see if we start working on it. I don't have anything else unless someone else had something else on that topic.
Yeah, on that topic, I think we're good. I think I said my piece. The main thing is just those low-level things. If you got those working, I think the rest of it could be worked through. I think that's the hard part, is just replicating some of those things in the binary, some of those core functionalities there.
Yeah.
And just again, as the kind of container partisan, if we could at some point get a discussion going about where people's pain points are, maybe we could save you some work.
Yeah. I mean, the unsatisfying thing for you is that I think a lot of it is an irrational fear.
I didn't want to say it, but that's what I was thinking.
It's just Ceph is already hard enough to operate. I don't want to also learn how to be a containers person. That's the fear. That's what it is. It's like I want to focus on PGs and that sort of thing, not having to work out why Docker's broken.
I can give you a couple of pain points that I know of just from having worked with a couple of people. The logging is a big one, and and then figuring out how to do things like GDB and other tooling inside the container.
That's interesting. How often are admins using GDB in practice?
Only when stuff breaks, which is when they're most angry.
Right? Yeah, true. Yeah. So for adding tools, you can bring up a container and join it to another container's namespace. So we could do something like deliver a debug container. Kubernetes has something along these lines. I often will bring up Kubernetes as a model of things where you can like steal ideas from, because it's a little bit more mature as a general platform. The GDB one, yeah. So in theory, you could bring up a container, join it to the other container's namespace, and run GDB within it. Yeah, so there's doable things, but it would have to be like, okay, there would be some retraining, and if there's like, hey, I don't want to learn new stuff, yeah.
I wonder if we could automate that and make it an easier process. Like you have this Ceph container, and you can like side load these other things onto it for making debugging and analysis easy. I don't know if there's some way to make that process simpler, but that'd be a win, I think.
Yeah, I agree. That's something you could do similarly to the way Ceph ADM shell works today. Ceph ADM GDB shell or something.
Yeah. Could you get the symbols that way as well for the process, assuming you didn't have it in the default container?
Probably. There could just be another container image that just brings in the symbols, the debug info RPM as another layer. So it's doable. It's just work, of course. It's
exactly.
also work to build another backend. So, but these are good topics to capture, because if people are doing them in a pinch, and again, either interface could implement it. So if there was a Ceph ADM GDB command that was implemented by the container backend, there could be a simpler implementation in the package backend.
Yeah, I mean, like on the package side, it's all like if you're running in bare metal, it's all pretty straightforward, right? You've got debug symbol RPMs, you've got GDB on the system. There's basically nothing to do; it just more or less works these days.
Yeah, true.
Well, anyway, that's maybe a little off topic, but those are probably the two big ones that seem to keep coming up.
The other one, Mark, before you join the other one is like security fixes of third-party packages.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Since you've brought that up, my brain's been going full speed, going, how could I solve this? I have some ideas, but they're pretty half-baked at this point, so I won't go into any depth, but there could be some options there.
Yeah. As a start, we should try to slim down the container images that we distribute. Right now, they have a lot of unnecessary packages. If you upload one of the images to Harbor, I think you get something like 250 critical security vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean that's part of it. You're using upstream images, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably a image build process thing that we can look into.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for letting us jump in on this weekly call and do this early brainstorming. We'll be back in touch if we decide to go ahead and like to probably get more detail and to also, you know, bounce some ideas. How do you prefer to if we do work on this? How do you prefer, like at this meeting or via Ceph Devel or on Slack or?
I'm fine with kind of any of them. This is usually the main meeting we have for like bigger topics. We also have like the stand-ups on Monday and Thursday for smaller updates or individual questions at those. So coming to any of those meetings, I think, obviously depending on the size, if it's a big thing, maybe it's better on today, on Monday, Thursday. And also I'm fine with you messaging me on Slack or something.
There is a Ceph ADM Slack.
Okay. There's a channel in the upstream Ceph one. It's just almost hasn't been used really. Like Paul Kuzner made it, and then I think the very first post was actually today. The FPS something.
Okay, yeah, I see it. All right, I've joined, so we'll see.
Yeah, you can definitely post in there. Right now, it's not really being used, so
okay,
room for whatever you want to talk about.
Cool. All right, so thanks a lot. I'll drop now to prepare for next meeting. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Yeah, so I guess that was the big topic for today. Was this stuff. Interesting project they're proposing. We'll have to see if they're willing to go to it. I think it's possible if they're willing to do all, as I said, the low level work to get this stuff to go. We said we didn't want to talk about the IPv6 stuff anymore. Maybe we can put that off to next week if people have a bit more time, if they want to look at the scope ID stuff, figure what's going on. Is there anything else you want to talk about this week after all of that? You could always make trackers for some of these issues as well. Like we've talked about, like getting GDB or the logging stuff to work a bit better.
Yeah, that might actually also be worth an Etherpad that tracks like container pain points, because some of them are a little too abstract. The GDB one, yes, could probably be a tracker, but some of them are a little bit abstract. So I don't know if it's worth a tracker yet. I also didn't imply that we shouldn't talk about the IPv6 stuff. I just want to make sure those guys got a chance to talk first, because I probably could talk about the IPv6 stuff for 15 minutes. So,
okay, I see. Yeah, I guess maybe we don't really have much in here to start a tracker with, but I guess we could start one for your stuff, and at least start with these three sort of things. They're obviously pretty high level.
I can definitely say, even in my own, like when I'm like hacking on something, and I think the last time was when I was hacking on some of the NFS stuff, and I kept changing settings, and one of my issues is I kept getting the names. I kept not typing the names correctly. So, maybe a local command that helps you map between the service and the local daemon name could be handy. Stuff like that.
Yeah, just miscellaneous pain points, I guess. To track them to do later. I was also looking while we were talking about the tools and stuff. We do have this thing. I don't think it does what he was talking about, but this is sort of what we have currently for if you want to run tools. It's mostly think for Ceph tools rather than like GDB, but
right.
This is sort of what we have. I guess we'd have to expand something like this to have like a debug container or something that can do GDB stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So what we would want to build is a container image that's layered on top of the current one, so you don't have this extraneous stuff that has the symbols and has tools like maybe strace, GDB, a handful of other things that you find useful when you're doing like immediate debugging.
Yeah, so I guess talk with Guillaume or someone who's more involved with the build stuff and see if it's possible to have almost a separate container image like that we could pull down to do debugging stuff, like along with our releases. That'd be cool. do that. I'm not really sure how they do it currently. The containers. I probably asked somebody like down.
Yeah, I think right now one of the issues with the build process might be I think Ceph produces exactly one image, and this is definitely an ask to say, oh, we're going to go into a world where we start delivering more than just one. But it's something we just need to talk about.
Yeah, because I know the Ceph container repo is capable of making a bunch of different images. We just only publish the one CentOS 8, I think right now it is, image at the very end. We build all the packages and stuff.
You can have all sorts of like discussions, like do you keep it in the same repository, but do you give it a different tag, like v17-debug, or do you have a separate repo? We can get into all that kind of.
Yeah, and I could see a world where like if we built them like regularly, we could even have like a default debug image or something. Like say maybe we have default images. If we got it like very formalized, like that, like maybe help with that stuff.
Yeah, the other thing is it's similarly to the debug. Like there's a debugging tool I didn't know I needed, or the security fix one. My thought processes are giving people a way to build their own images simply. It could be opening a can of worms, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, I mean that'd be helpful if you could like change one package inside the container or something to do the full rebuild thing.
Yeah, I mean it would that actually is not that hard. The way the containers are layered, so basically you start off with Ceph as your base layer, and then you do whatever. Either a DNF install blah blah blah, or I want to add this config file to the image. The question is automating it and giving them a way to make use of it, because right now it's like we expect everything to be in a public registry. So that's kind of the challenge, because they're just used to saying, oh, okay, Red Hat just published, or Debian just published a OpenSSL fix. Okay, I can just consume that. Now, there is an issue with that, which is not all packages that say use SSL are necessarily using OpenSSL. And that's one of the reasons like RHEL forces everyone onto the same SSL, even for stuff where the upstream tries to push back against that. I'm going wicked off topic. Sorry.
I
think you get my gist.
Without going off topic, there's so many side tangents you can go on about this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
I was going to say I also do a lot of Go, and Go has the same problem. Most of Go is statically compiled. So if you're delivering a Go binary, it's not linking to libfoobar.so. It's kind of pulled in at compile time. So those folks would also have similar issues, even in a world where there aren't containers, if they're using languages like Go that are doing a lot of static compiles. So the whole drop a package thing is not a panacea to security issues, but I can understand why people have that concern.
Yeah, it's at least some legitimate reason. It's something we could improve on, try to get as close as we can to how it works for packages. See what we can automate.
Oh, and he mentioned Harbor. Is that Docker's security scanner? Does anyone know? I'm more familiar with Quay, which has its Claire, I think. It has a security scanner built in.
I'm not sure myself. I don't know.
All right, because that's interesting that he said Harbor, because I'm like, oh, but we deliver using Quay. And I'm like, so is he pulling the official Ceph images into another registry first? I don't know.
Maybe it'd be a separate thing. I just Googled it. It just came up to this.
Interesting. I was not familiar with this.
Yeah.
It uses Claire. Huh.
So it's not like it's a separate project just for doing this exact thing, just looking for vulnerabilities. There's probably some other stuff. Going off the left side, this is one of the things it does, I guess. But they must have been using this for scanning images. Yeah, I guess that that is like at least like a legitimate use case for. I was saying it was something we need to improve on, try to get closer to how easy it is for packages. It definitely is something that'd be harder for containers right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's worthwhile that, like, I get where they're coming from, but I think it's a ton of work. And if the request was coming from, like, oh, you guys do the work, I would be like, no, they're interested in implementing it, which is good. But I would prefer to, give them better container tooling if I had my way.
Yeah, I think we could do both things. If they're going to do that part, we could at least help them with that and the parts that overlap, and then we could use that to find out what things we can improve on for the container one. And we already got a bunch of good information out of that, things we can look at.
Indeed.
So I think if they go for it, I think it could be a good, nice project. And I guess the only thing concern would be like support after the fact, after they're done with it. If there's anybody who would watch it,
exactly.
But it also depends on, I guess, how much they put in there. I don't know if they're only do the most basic functionality and it's not going to improve that much. Maybe it wouldn't be that hard to maintain.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if this is one of those, like, we're going to build it and use it ourselves, then they've got probably the proper amount of so-called skin in the game. But if it's something like we're going to build it to make Ceph more popular, and then there isn't a ton of support after the initial code drop, that could be an issue.
Yeah. One other concern I had that I guess I didn't talk about then is for testing, because that in theory could almost like double our test suite if we have to test the package version of this as well.
Yeah.
So there would be a lot more test runs that have to happen, which I know the lab already has a lot of stuff going on there. So it could also be a difficulty.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, it would be good because you could just say, oh, reuse most of the existing Ceph ADM tests because the end result should largely be the same. But like you said, there are resource issues too, and having another backend could, in theory, double the test time for the orchestration pieces.
Yeah, I think at least parts of it would have to be rewritten as well, because I think some of it's using like the shell and stuff for a lot of the commands, and there's some specific tests in there. Like I know we have an iSCSI one now that actually checks the Etsy host in the container because we had that other issue. That obviously wouldn't be a thing in the package one. So there's something that can just be dropped. There's something, I think we'd actually end up needing like some sort of separate like sub suites of tests. That do the container one. Hopefully it'd be one that we could run like regularly, because I know there's some regular runs that happen just to check that things are okay. And then just if there's modifications to that one, if we assume that we keep them separate enough that we shouldn't be breaking the package one by modifying the container one.
Mm-hmm. I notice we have a last minute join. Do you have a topic or anything you'd like to raise before we close out the meeting?
No, thank you. I was just late. I think already Dan joined the meeting before, correct?
Okay, you're with Dan.
Sure.
Yeah. I was just late, but it was also fun or interesting to listen to your conversation. Yeah, I think we have to have another discussion sometime later, perhaps. Hopefully, in the next few days or weeks.
Yeah, it sounded like Dan was going to go with whoever's in that group and talk about after this meeting, like the feasibility of stuff that we talked about in here. Because a lot of like the takeaway, but I think at least from my end was that most of the work is going to be on the low level stuff, like actually doing the deployment of the daemons and checking where they are and installing the packages and stuff is going to be the harder part. And then the actual like more high level manager module things that ADM does, you would have to transfer most of that over. And so if they wanted to work on that, there's going to be a lot of like proof of concept work on the low level stuff first. So.
Yeah. I mean, upfront, I shared also with Dan and the other guys as well. I mean, we did a meetup with Sage, I think in 2021, where we did the comparison between Ceph ADM and Rook. But I didn't find any slides on this. how I can see the progress, or is there an updated slide where you can see the differences, the feature sets of Rook and Ceph ADM? Do you have something like this, an updated version of it?
I don't know. I wasn't there when that discussion. I don't know. They talked about the manager Rook or just Rook in general. You know?
Rook. So I mean, we have this tool. We are at the moment supporting the Ceph ADM. I mean, we started this with Sebastian Hahn, I think, a few years ago, and always try to improve Ceph ADM, and we are heavily using it. And the other topic is that we use Rook since a while. So. And I think there was a working student at Red Hat who prepared something like this. I can't remember the name, and I only found the slides in my recording of the meetup. I think it was end of I think one day before Sage left. I think 13th of November or October in 2021, and I tried to find something if there was an update in the last few years, and yeah, I did not find anything. So would be interesting as well.
So. At least from our side, I don't think we've done any new comparisons. We have one person who's not here right now. They're on parental leave, but they were working on Rook and Ceph ADM. Like, they're the only person I know who's doing that. So they might have a better idea of that stuff when they're back. Like, I'm mostly focused on Ceph ADM, and the Rook team is kind of separated to some degree. There's some overlap where we'll talk about features, but a lot of things are put on their own.
Yeah. Yeah, perhaps or we have to do it by our own. Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, I have to talk with. I think Tobias joined your meetings in the last weeks or months as well sometimes, and he's at the moment on vacation. I just have to talk with him as well, because I think we had some feedback. What do you want to improve in Ceph ADM, especially with? I think one of the topic was with the specification of how to detect hardware or devices in general. We had some problems in larger clusters. Yeah, a few months ago. But yeah,
okay. I think I remember someone named Tobias joining, but I don't think he ever actually talked.
Yeah,
when he was here.
That could be. Yeah, So I think next time I will be a bit better prepared, and then yeah.
But this is definitely the meeting for. If you guys want to come in and you have topics, this is what we have this meeting for. So
yeah,
I'm glad to hear stuff.
Okay. Good. Then have a great day, and thank you. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
I'm gonna drop. See ya.
I'm about to end the recording and end it as well. So.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Let's see if that ends properly. I hit stop live stream. I can't tell if it's delayed or not. I don't know what it's doing.
Might be delayed. Looks like it's still streaming.
I know when I started it also was delayed, but I have no idea how long it's going to take to do something.
It's too bad it doesn't do that just automatically for you.
Yeah, well, I honestly don't know what happens if I leave this meeting, will it just live stream in an empty room forever? That's why I want to stop. I actually don't know what it does.
I guess we can find out if it doesn't stop here in a minute or two.
Yeah, the button's not doing much. I still have to ask Mike what happened, I guess, because I can't get it to stop.
Where are the recordings stored? Is it?
It's supposed to live stream to this YouTube channel, but unlisted, I think, as far as I know. So no one can see it yet. And then Mike's going to go through it and then make it a public video after, is what I believe was the idea.
Gotcha. Yeah. Because I think that's the only thing you want to be conscious of, right? Not to drive up the utilization there.
Yeah, so that's why I want to stop the stream, but I can't actually get it to stop. I've tried to do the button a couple of times now, but it's not actually doing anything.
Yeah, I don't have the button on my side.
I can let me see. Is there anything in here that? Yeah, because if I just do, where is the actual tab?
Or actually, how about this idea? We could leave and then rejoin. Just like end the meeting and then rejoin. Traders.
Why is it doing that?
Sweet.
I don't know what happened. Did it stop again? I didn't restart it. Why did it do that? I don't know. I hit stop again. Hopefully it stops. I can't sit here forever. But yeah, so you said the channel. What do you mean the channel of the new thing they're making?
No, the Slack channel. Maybe call it Ceph Orchestrator to kind of mirror what we did on IRC, because I think they're building another
yeah, it sounds like
orchestrator module potentially.
In the discussion, they were calling it like Ceph ADM RPM or something like that, but I don't know if you know what it would end up being.
Yeah, we had to talk about that in the next go around, but hopefully we can choose a different name to avoid confusion.
Yeah, because I assume they're going to be doing proof of concept stuff now, so hopefully even the Ceph ADM itself was renamed at some point. And it was the Ceph Orchestrator for a bit, so they can definitely rename it.
Yeah, it was that, and then for a while I think it was called Ceph Daemon, so you'll see CD.
I do remember that for a while. I was always wondering what CD was about in like the tests for the binary, but I eventually found back in the history far enough.
Yep. So, hey, well, I'm gonna drop. So,
all right, see ya.
Have a good one.